Achieving sustainability as a state of existence should be our number one global priority. Realizing this sustainability is imperative to maintaining any hope for any foreseeable future. It may sound dramatic, but our systems and our future are at stake, and as it happens, we're at a tipping point. With the choices we've made as a civilization and continue to make, despite warning, the odds, unfortunately, are not stacked in our favor. The predicament we've created for ourselves is almost unmaneuverable. So in my eyes, the way I see it, we really only have one choice, and that's a complete revolution in sustainability, an overhaul, a redefinition. This, of course, is extremely difficult when the very concept of sustainability has been chained for so long to notions of environmental stability and the preservation of ecological balance. So the idea is that if we somehow make our environmental footprint negligible, we will have created a sustainable world. The current assumption of sustainability is that if somehow magically we manage to restore our ecosystems, put an abrupt halt to climate change, reduce our natural resource consumption to a point where we won't need more than one Earth to sustain our lifestyle, if we fixed the gaping hole in our ozone, saved all the polar bears that Greenpeace advertises about, then we will have achieved a sustainable world. Despite its true nature of multidimensionality and interconnectedness, which I'll explain a bit later on, modern society has fallen into the impractical habit of equating sustainability with environmental stability, two terms that are not by any means interchangeable. This ideological blasphemy has poisoned even the strongest upholders of sustainability. The UN recently pinpointed 7 necessary questions that need to be answered in order to reach sustainability. As expected, most of these questions were centered on eradicating environmental malpractice. So how can we provide access to clean energy for everyone and make sure that the energy we produce doesn't contribute to climate change? How can we make sure that our oceans are healthy and that our marine life isn't threatened by pollution or climate change? How can we build better transportation systems that get us where we need to go without contributing to congestion or pollution? Even the Apple Dictionary, a high schooler's most trusted essay writing resource, makes this false association, defining sustainability as conserving an ecological balance by avoiding the depletion of natural resources. These past 2 years specifically, I've focused on challenging this misconception, this jaded view of sustainability. I believe, rather, that in fact unsustainability is the culmination or the convergence of a lot of the world's most pressing issues. So conflict, resource scarcity, government partisanship, economic disparity, industrial takeover, etc., etc. I would define sustainability as a global state of existence of minimal conflict, environmental stability, just and open-minded societies, and overall good governance that operates in closed-loop cycles, maintaining and improving upon itself simultaneously. This is what sustainability looks like right now. The different spheres that come together to create it are isolated, they're separate. And this is what sustainability should look like: interconnected, multidimensional, interdependent. And while this definition is a much more cohesive and and holistic representation of what sustainability actually is, I have to admit that I have not always adopted it for myself. In around late 2010 and early 2011, my ideas or thoughts about sustainability were painfully traditional. At the time, I was working specifically on the awareness and ultimate eradication of plastic pollution, and I was convinced, absolutely convinced, that sustainability had no place beyond the environmental place. Maybe this was because I had only heard the term discussed in that specific context, or maybe it was my refusal to look beyond the boundaries created and maintained by a social consensus. But regardless, and thankfully, that same summer of 2011, my entire reality was shattered. Not just in terms of sustainability, I was forced into a gross life reprioritization, as much as that can happen for a 14-year-old, and a complete reevaluation of my thoughts. Seeds of Peace, the most transformative 3.5 weeks of my life. In the March of 2011, I was in my car, riding back from school on a regular day, listening to NPR as I always did, when a particularly interesting story ran on Seeds of Peace, a unique summer camp where the brightest young adults from regions of conflict are brought together for intensive conflict resolution and reconciliation. So, in a moment of unusual spontaneity, I turned to my dad, who was driving, and I announced grandly that I knew where I was going for the summer. So with that, I took off for a month, despite my dad's skepticism, for what I didn't know would be 3.5 weeks that I would carry with me for the rest of my life and would continue to change me as time went. So I arrived at Seeds of Peace to an uproar of music and dance and happiness and love. And I think in that moment, on that first day, my expectations for life were forever changed. Never before had I been in a place where, or a community rather, that was so universally trusting and caring. I think this was perhaps the first time that I really experienced social sustainability. Yes, the tension between the Palestinians and the Israelis and the Egyptians and the Jordanians was evident, frightening even in my own bunk. But these kids had brought their hardships and their malice for the other side here to camp, and the South Asians, the Indians and Pakistanis had done the same for their conflict. But something about singing and dancing with each other on the shores of a serene, pleasant lake as we welcomed our brothers and our sisters from unfamiliar cultures and backgrounds and geographies gave me a sense of hope. I think even more than that, maybe a sense of belonging. Then the real work started. So these kids who grow up hating each other are forced to live, dine, and participate in intensive dialogue sessions with each other. Needless to say, many tears were shed, many voices were raised, many questions were asked, and even a few chairs were thrown. But even more importantly than that, stories were shared, friendships were forged, and a community was created. I really don't even think that life-changing does the experience justice. As you can see here, I'm in my Seeds attire. I thought it'd be a nice touch. So I came back from camp, and as you can imagine, I had to sort of process everything that had happened. Actually, I'm still processing what happened 2 years ago. But once I vaguely did understand what I had gone through, I, like most other seeds, started looking for my role in the solution. What part am I going to play? And I think it was during this time that I sort of started to come to my conclusions about sustainability. I was forced to think outside my initial perceptions. Conflict is unsustainable. And of course, now the list is endless. So it includes things from environmental instability that everyone is familiar with, to things like government partisanship and economic disparity that most would not peg as large contributors to unsustainability. I think more than anything, I realized that environmental instability, it's only one part of it. So after Seeds, I started to acknowledge and expand my work into these other arenas within the sustainability space. I founded Unheard Voices, which is an organization that empowers youth to fight for this redefined sustainability. We tackled sustainability on a multitude of different fronts, so social justice, plastic pollution, peace and conflict resolution, and media bias even. Actually, one of my most recent endeavors is Peace Perspectives. Peace Perspectives is a online publication that combats media bias by reporting all key relevant perspectives of a news development. We are currently over 95 correspondents strong, coming from 8 different countries, reporting on 3 different conflict zones, and all of our correspondents are between the ages of 15 and 20. So in my dialogue group especially, at camp, media bias was a big problem that came up. We found it to perpetuate hate and conflict. So a Pakistani would be making an argument based on a completely different set of facts than his Indian counterpart. Even hard facts are subject to opinion. There are no facts, there is no correct history. History is but different perspectives, and there are only different interpretations of reality. So, you cannot eliminate bias. So why not expose the citizenry to all biases, creating an informed electorate that can form their own opinions and their own judgments about the world around them? But it's not always my experiences that inspire me. Mostly it's the work of others, specifically youth working towards sustainability. Letters from Humanity is a compilation of experiences of those living under occupation in Palestine. One of my good friends, Natasha Cox, she started it just this past year. And what's interesting about it, it's a really powerful representation of these experiences because they're so personal and they're presented through a human lens, not a political or analytical one like often discussed in the news. I certainly check it every day, and I would encourage you all to do the same. The next is the work of Boyan Slat. Some of you guys might be familiar with his work. He proposed the Ocean Cleanup Array, which is expected to clean over 7 million tons of plastic from the ocean. He's a very young guy, and he's in the middle of his feasibility study right now. And it's looking like it won't just provide an environmental impact, but also an economic value, and that it's going to be profitable. So this idea of sustainability, this redefined sustainability, it's an aspiration. It's an objective. It's a dream that I have for the millennial generation and for future generations that will claim its inheritance. After being in a place with such a concentrated force of passionate and driven young people, I realized that this generation, Generation Y, is going to be the generation that reaches this objective. I must admit that I have not adopted this dream out of desire, but rather out of circumstance. The millennial generation, my generation, has been given a world of destitution, of discord, of resource depletion, like I said, of economic disparity. And in the face of all of this negativity, I don't find our placement in history to be unfortunate, but rather a force of circumstance. In this unique and climactic era of international connectivity and collaboration, the millennial generation has the unique capability to call upon each and every one of its members to unite against unsustainability. A recent Presumer report came out, actually, that pegged the ability to unite as the millennial generation's biggest problem that will stifle its ability to make change. So while we have this capability, we haven't necessarily harnessed it yet. Redefining sustainability as more than environmental stability gives millennials and businesses alike the freedom to associate with sustainability or pursue sustainability through whatever path they choose, not necessarily environmental justice. It gives them the freedom to associate with sustainability in whatever way they choose. However, before we confront perhaps the largest crisis to date, it is imperative that we let go of this societal dogma and we redefine sustainability, recognizing it for its multidimensional nature. This will no doubt be an uphill battle, but I certainly will not stand idly by and watch the slow motion implosion of our world. We indeed have the power to bring this impending doom that we face to an abrupt halt. But it's all going to start with the redefinition that will allow the millennial generation, and all generations, in fact, to come together and unite in a hope for not just any future, but a bright one. Thank you.